I delivered telegrams. Mother had the only telephone up here, private line there was. So she had the telegram service. They'd call and she'd take the telegram and then deliver it. And we got, I think, 25 cents a telegram or something like that for delivering. They would come to the office. They'd call from, I believe their main office was in Eggetown. And if there was something come here, they'd call. And Mother had a little Western Union thing, and she'd write it down and then type it. And that would go in a telegram, and I'd give it to me, and I'd take it to the house. And there was a house right on the beach down here. And the guy that owned it had bought it just about after the war started, 1940-41. And he was in import-export business. And he came from Norway, I believe, or Sweden, or Denmark. One of those countries, I don't know which one. Well, anyway, he bought the place, and I delivered telegrams there quite often. And I went over there, this was maybe halfway through the war, 43 maybe, something like that. And I rode down, and I was on my bike, and it was just coming dusk. And I went to the house, nobody was at the house, but I saw a light in the guest house. It was early, but I saw a light. And I went down there, and the guy had a door across the porch, and I was young, and I just put my hand on the door and sprang over, and then I could hear, he was on a thing, he was talking, and I kind of peeked in the window, and he was back to me. He was sitting there, and the antenna was up, and he was sending. So it scared me. I jumped off, and I got the bike, and I went up, and I had to deliver the telegram, I thought, so I came down, and I was singing and whistling. And I came down and I said, "Hey, anybody here?" He come to the door. And I gave him the telegram. So then I went back home and I told Mother that I saw him, and he was back too, and he really was signaling with a teletype thing, a radio. So she called up over on the Cape, FBI. It was a number that we were supposed to call if we had any big problems about that sort of stuff, or if we saw something. So she told them what I'd seen, and they said they would send a man over in the morning. And they sent a man over, and I had to take him over. It was in his car, but I went riding, and he wanted me to show him which house it was and describe the guy and everything. So I did. And they really, I know they were around here for a while, but I never knew what happened. And then many years later, I was a fireman, and they had a fireman dinner, and the guest speaker was a Mr. Carpenter, and that was the guy that I met back in 42 or 3. So after he spoke and he talked about some of his adventures, he never said anything about being on the island. So I went up to him and I introduced myself, and I said, "Mr. Carpenter, were you here during the war?" I said, I went out with a Mr. Carpenter, and I told him, I said, I took over to a house that was right near the beach, and there was a fella sending on a teletype or whatever it was, radio, and a signal, and I said, a young man came over, and would that have been you? And he looked at me and he says, "Yeah, you're the boy, aren't you?" I said, "Yes." So he told me what had happened, which I was very interested. They didn't arrest anybody. They just followed him. And he went all around the country. He went to New York, and they just followed him. They had somebody watch him, and they looked where his contacts were. And then he went to Chicago, and he went out to California, and he went all the way up to Washington. And they never grabbed him, but they just saw who he went to, and they got the names and addresses of all those people. And they never did pick him up, and he did get away because he got out of the country without him knowing it. He went out on a submarine, they thought. And but they had all his contacts. After he had left the house, after the house had been closed down, the guy went away. It wasn't a winterized house. They came over. We had the keys because we took care of the house. And they went in and they looked at all his stuff and tried to look for mail and maps and stuff. And I don't know what they ever found, but he didn't say nothing about, what they found. But he did go back and to see if there was anything that they could use in there.
Wow,
so
you were a war hero.
No. I was interested. I never had heard what had happened, and nobody had ever said nothing. And I was very lucky to find out what had happened.